Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast, where we talk about all things sustainable fat loss. We take people on 90-day journeys to creating fat loss forever. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Breaking 90 podcast. I'm your host, Alex Harriman, here with my co-host, Kelly Sarlo, and we are two of the coaches of Breaking 90 Fitness. Thanks for being here with us. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. I'm living for your wife's updates of her daily gym going. We've got this text thread going, and like she's observing some really interesting behaviors and personalities. And sometimes I think about this because she goes after school, right, as a teacher, and I go
Usually,
I go at like 7 in the morning, and sometimes I don't want to get out of bed, but I think like, could I top the gym story that Dev had yesterday?
We get, I go, usually if I go to a public gym, it's around 6 a.m. And so that's like the same time you go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get some interesting characters that time of day too. Like I've seen people doing like compound movement lifts in Crocs. I saw one guy, so I'm going to try to explain this as well as I can without giving a visual demonstration, but he was up on a bench with one foot and a bench with the other foot. So he had his 2 feet on 2 different benches. And then he was doing a lunge, but the way that he was angled in position, like it wouldn't have changed anything by being on benches. Like he got the same range of motion that he would have on the floor. It's just the risk factor went through the roof. Yeah, there's always interesting things you see at public gyms.
Yeah. It's wild, and like it's entertainment, honestly. Like I'm getting a workout in, which is awesome. My movement's up, and also like a little bit of a laugh.
Yeah, the one that gets me, and if this is you, I'm sorry, not you. I know it's not you, but you as the listener. Don't do something in a squat rack that could be done outside of a squat rack. Go ahead.
You've already given me that lecture, and it was me. So I like to out myself so that people feel comfortable being, having humility and saying like, oh, I can fix that.
For example, if you're doing something like a curl, so say you're curling like 50 pounds, most gyms have 2 or 3 squat racks. A 50-pound bar could be placed anywhere in the gym and easily picked up. Don't take up the squat rack to do that. Things like a deadlift, unless it's a platform. So I'm not going to get too far into this, but if it's just a regular squat rack, your deadlift comes down to the floor. You probably don't need a squat rack.
Okay. This is helpful. So are you telling us this because that's good etiquette and like someone else could be using it for a much better purpose that you can't do elsewhere? Or is it like you're being lazy using a machine?
No, it's etiquette because most gyms have like I said, 2 or 3 squat racks. So what the squat rack is great for is holding up a weight that would be a really big pain in the ass to lift off of the floor. So like something like a squat, you're going to have so much weight that getting it from the floor to your shoulders would be almost impossible. Something like an overhead press, getting it from the floor to your shoulders would be really tough unless you're lifting very, very light. Even like if you're doing rows or something like that where the bar starts elevated, I get it. I get why you would use a squat rack for that. But if it's something like that's the whole purpose of a squat rack, is to get that heavy weight elevated for you so you don't have to lift it up. If you're lifting like a 40-pound bar and that's not hard for you, for some people that might be, that's fine. Use the squat rack if it's tough for you. But if you're like a big dude and you could easily, or a strong girl for that matter, anybody, if it's a weight that you could easily lift to the place you need to lift it, you don't need a squat rack for that.
This is great. I'm gonna write this down.
It's just like, because most of the time I go to a public gym, I'm going there to squat because they have really heavy duty squat racks that like a home gym isn't usually that same quality. And if I go in there and I can't get a squat rack and there's like somebody like curling 50 pounds in the squat rack, I'm like, I want to strangle myself.
Okay.
All right, let's roll.
Thank you for sharing that. So, today we really want to talk about how to actually get lean, because I think like people use this term and it's great. Lean is a great thing because it's definitely healthy. But how do we actually get there?
Yeah, and on top of that, the cost of getting lean.
Ooh.
So it's not just how to, because the how to is one thing. The cost of it is a whole nother beast.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so and the reason I put those two together is because like anybody has the ability to get lean.
Mhm.
And it sounds nice in theory, but it's often not worth it to the extent that you have in your mind. And I say this as like somebody who's been in the fitness industry for 14 years now, I think. No, more, 16 years now. Um, I'm not as lean as a lot of people would expect. I'm not as lean as like what a lot of people would consider ideal, but I'm very realistic about what the cost is to get there. I know how to get there. Um, I could get there, you could get there, any one of our listeners could get there. It's often not worth it to push that last percentage if we're healthy. Like, don't get me wrong, we should all strive for optimal health or ideal health, but like getting lean is a whole nother beast. So let's talk about it, because there are times that it's worth it, and I've been there before, and I know for a lot of you listening, you're like, yeah, I really really want that, and that's cool. If you want it, you can do it. um Anything you want to add before we just jump right into it?
Yeah, kind of just summarizing what you've already said, because when you said the cost of getting there, I'm thinking like dollars and cents, but you're talking about the cost of what you're going to be doing lifestyle wise,
Yeah.
which is really great because I think a lot of people they know changes need to be made, but they don't actually consider overall what that does to their lifestyle and if they're ready for that.
Right.
We've done a whole podcast on getting ready, willing, and able, and that's different. And then also you're actually spelling out that there's a difference between just losing weight, which is awesome and great, and going to get you into better health for sure. But there's a difference between losing weight and actually being lean.
Totally. Yeah. So um just a side note there, like an optimal body fat percentage for a male is between 10 and 20% for like optimal health, and that's a massive range. There's a very big difference between somebody who's 10% body fat and somebody who's 20% body fat. An optimal body fat range for a female is 18 to 28%. There's a very big difference between 18% and 28%. Most of the bodies that people are like, this is what I'm striving for, this is what I want to look like, are like 18 to 21% for a female. That's like what most female strive for. That being said, some people want to get leaner, and leaner isn't a bad thing, but like as you get down to the lower end, that 18% or less, like 15%, it's really freaking hard. You're going to have to make sacrifices that the world around you is not making. And that's tough to do. It's tough to wrap your head around the fact of like, why are these people making progress and I'm not making progress? Why can't I lose this last percent, these last couple pounds? Well, as you get lower and lower, it gets harder and harder. The sacrifices become greater and greater as a result.
Mm. Yeah, that's important to note. And we talk about the difference between purpose versus pleasure as some of our guiding principles. Um, that when you're pushing that hard, like pleasure is not really on your radar. Pleasure is not really a luxury that you're accessing very often, because this is bigger sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To get in that, like that, I'm just gonna talk in the women's percentages because most of our listeners are women, anyways. But to get in that, like 18 to 28%, to get to the high end of that, the 28%, like you're not going to have to sacrifice quality of life. You're still gonna be able to enjoy yourself. You're still gonna be able to eat the foods you like, drink the drinks you like, and live like a normal quality of life. You still, if you're higher than that, are going to have to make sacrifice, because we have to make sacrifice to make change. But the sacrifice isn't going to be so great that you're going to start losing quality of life, in my opinion. As you get closer to 18, that's going to change. You're going to lose a lot more of the pleasures, if you attribute pleasures to what you consume.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
people don't. Some people don't give a shit about food. Okay, so let's start then. So the cost of getting lean, first of all, um, is a largely nutrition battle. And you've heard us talk about this tons. You can't out train a bad diet. Like your training is going to complement your your journey to leanness, if you will. But the nutrition's going to be the thing that gets you there. You guys have heard me talk about this lots, but to lose weight, we need to create a calorie deficit. So to create a calorie deficit, we need to be burning more than we're consuming. To get lean, to lose fat, in most cases, you need to lose weight. There's going to be some listeners that are on the opposite end that are going to probably have to gain some weight, put on some muscle mass. That's a bit of a different beast. But for our average listener, you're trying to lose fat. You need to create that calorie deficit. So, anything you want to add before I keep going down this track?
I don't want to jump ahead of you, so I'm going to say no for now.
Okay, so um ideally what we're doing is figuring out what your norm is rather than just trying to increase your norm. And so a lot of people hear that and they're like, okay, I need to burn more calories. It's easier just to eat less calories in most cases.
Yeah.
So figure out what your norm is, and you're going to say, how do I figure that out? It doesn't really matter. You don't need the exact number because the exact number is changing constantly. What you need to see is that you're slowly losing weight. And so we're going to find a daily consumption where we're slowly losing weight. So if you want to start with a calculation, there's a million on the internet. But even reach out to me and I can give you a pretty accurate estimate of where to start. But for most people, if you start around your body weight times 13 calories per pound, that gives you a decent starting point. But that's going to look different for every person. It's going to look completely different for every person. So that what we have to do is we have to pick a caloric intake that we're going to start with, monitor it for a week or two, and say, did I lose weight? Did I gain weight? Did I stay the same? If I gained weight, I need to go down. If I stayed the same, I need to go a little bit down. If I lost weight at a nice, slow, sustainable rate, I'm probably in a sweet spot. If I lost weight too quickly, I've probably made too big of a deficit. It's not going to be sustainable. I should increase a little bit.
Neat. And I think that's where people are going to get a feeling of like being confounded, right? Because you see the weight go down a little bit, that feels like a reward in the brain. And you want to make faster progress because that feels good in the reward center of your brain. However, you followed it up really great by saying, if you've made too much progress too fast, this isn't going to be sustainable. And I think that's hard for people to wrap their head around, because we just think, oh, the faster we get there, the better it will be. But remember, this whole thing is, what is the cost of getting lean?
Mm.
You don't want, if the idea of getting down to that 18%, that cost feels way too big for you, don't go hard right in the beginning, right? Because you're going to fall off that wagon. You're taking away as much pleasure as possible that you still have access to while making progress. Eventually, your caloric intake is going to go down to a point where pleasure is less frequent, like we mentioned. Don't do that right in the beginning.
And you can go hard for short bursts of time for little challenges and stints, but going hard for long periods of time lowers your energy. Remember that calories equal energy, energy equals performance, energy equals recovery. Like the food we put into our body helps us recover and perform so that we can get back at the exercise we're doing, so that we can feel good, so that we can have energy, so that we can lose fat optimally. If we're not giving our body enough fuel, all of these things start to go downhill. So if we're in a massive calorie deficit, now we start to feel sluggish and tired. We're not recovering well. We're not losing fat optimally. Our metabolism's going to slowly start to adjust, and our baseline is actually going to get lower as a result. So being in a massive calorie deficit just encourages your body to be like, oh, this is my new norm. I can lower my output. I can lower how much I burn in a day-to-day basis. So you're doing yourself a favor in the short term by making quicker progress very short-sighted, but long term, you're just hurting your progress. Like slower, I guarantee slower is better for you. In 95% of situations.
Yeah, not to mention, like, our entire goal as, Breaking Any Fitness is to have you eating as much as possible while still seeing the progress that you wanna make, right? Like, doesn't that sound a lot more fun than being like, "Oh, you wanna make progress? Let's make this the least fun process possible."
Yeah, that's worth repeating. We want you eating as much as possible while still seeing progress, not eating as little as possible to see faster progress. That's not worth it. I promise you, it's not worth it.
Mm.
So, in the beginning, you're going to lose some water retention. You might see some quicker progress depending on how you were eating before you start this journey. So don't make drastic changes in the first few weeks or even the first month, because your body could just be adjusting. There could be some of those big swings. After a while, though, when we start to establish our norm, you want to be losing, kind of like the 5 to 10% of your total weight. That's not accurate. A half to a full percent of your total weight every week type of thing. So like a 200-pound person, like losing 2 pounds in a week is not uncommon, but I also don't want you like handcuffing yourself to that idea, because slower is still better. Like if you can accept it and lose like 0.1 of a pound per week, that's the best case scenario. It allows your body to maintain muscle mass. It allows your energy to stay high. It allows you to keep performing well and recovering well. Like that's best case scenario. Although I do understand people want to see faster progress than that. We just don't want it getting too big. Keep in mind also when we talk about getting lean doesn't mean like skinny,
Mhm,
right? Getting lean means having a well-defined physique,
mhm.
and that comes with muscle mass. If we lose weight too quickly, we lose some of that muscle mass, which we should be avoiding at all costs as we age, because it becomes increasingly more difficult to gain muscle mass as we age. So hold on to it. When you're wherever you are now, lose it as slowly as possible, or gain it where you have opportunities to gain it. But don't ever be willing to sacrifice muscle mass. It's a very limited resource that's hard to bring back. So anytime we gain or lose a pound, part of that pound is fat, part of that pound is muscle, part of that pound is water. We want to make as much of it lost fat as possible, gained muscle as possible. And the way to do that is just to go slow. Whether you're gaining or losing, go slow, slow, slow. We'll get into the nutrient side of things next, but that's what I wanted to put in there. Anything you want to add there, Kelly?
Yeah, that's great. I think pardon me, I guess I do wanna add, um, you're helping people with these little tidbits learn how to prioritize things, and I hope people aren't missing that, right? The first question is, do you want to be lean or do you want to lose weight, right? So knowing the difference between the two. What cost are you willing to, incur in your lifestyle? And then, looking at, Kate, in terms of speed, what do I want to look at? What do I value? Do I value skinny? And I'm not pushing that. That's a question that people will be asking. Or do I value the muscle mass so that I have the longevity and lifestyle I want long term? So I think this is a really good thing to be thinking about.
And like muscle mass doesn't mean like bodybuilder physique, guys. Like there's very skinny people that have well-defined proportional muscle mass. That's fine. But you don't want to sacrifice that. Everybody knows the difference between skinny fat and lean, right? Like there's skinny people with no muscle definition. I don't think there's a lot of people striving for that physique.
Yeah.
Um now if you're say up in the 40% body fat range, getting weight loss should be the top priority. Like we don't need to get into the nuts and bolts of it all. We don't need to start really dialing it in. As you lose weight, it's drastically going to help you get lean. If you're closer to that 18%, now we have to dial it in a lot more. We don't have as much wiggle room just to be like weight is weight, because now you don't have a lot of body fat to play with. Now we're dealing with a lot of muscle to fat on both sides of that spectrum. We don't want to start sacrificing muscle at that point. So basically, the more you have to go to your goal, the less you have to worry about all of the little intricacies. You just need to focus on creating that calorie deficit. But as we start getting leaner and leaner and leaner, that's where it really matters, the quality of foods we're eating. And I'm not saying it doesn't always, it's going to help you regardless. But it starts to matter more and it starts to get more difficult. So if you guys recall, there was a man who discovered that he wanted to test this theory that being in a calorie deficit creates weight loss. So he just ate out of a convenience store, all of his meals out of a convenience store. I forget what the period of time was. It was like a month, and he made sure he stayed in a calorie deficit, but just eating like junk food out of a convenience store for every single meal. He still lost weight. He probably lost a ton of muscle mass. He probably felt like shit. He wouldn't be recovering and performing well, but he lost weight. So if we know we have weight to lose, the number one priority has to be creating that calorie deficit. Now, after that, are all calories created equal? No. We could eat, say our calorie deficit's 2,000 calories. You could eat 2,000 calories of cheesies, or you could eat 2,000 calories of chicken and vegetables, and it's going to leave you feeling very different. I don't think anybody listening to this would argue that point. So the next step is making sure that we're getting high quality nutrients. For most of you, you're probably not eating enough protein. We need to prioritize protein, because protein is going to allow us to recover properly and allow the muscles to repair and continue to perform and maintain or increase that muscle mass that we just talked about. So we need to make sure we're getting enough protein. What is enough protein? Well, probably a little bit more than what you're eating now. Just push your comfort zone a little bit. Once again, there's lots of calculators and formulas we could use to find an ideal, but the ideal is like so far above what most people are doing that I'd rather you just push your comfort zone a little bit at a time and discover what feels right for you. If you want to talk formulas, shoot me a message and I can help you pick that ideal, but I don't really need to get into that on this. After that, like, prioritize the protein, and then after that is what you have left over. So say you have 2,000 calories and you're like, okay, I need 150 grams of protein. Each gram of protein is 4 calories. That means we have 600 calories allocated to protein. We have the other 1,400 calories that I can spend where I want to. Once again, if I use those other 1,400 calories on chocolate bars, or I use those other 1,400 calories on nutrient dense potatoes and vegetables and good whole foods, it's going to leave me feeling different. So that's when we have to start thinking about kind of that 80-20 rule. Like, let's make sure I'm fueling my body with the good stuff that leaves me feeling energetic, and then leave myself a little bit of that enjoyment, that pleasure, that wiggle room. That wiggle room gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller the leaner you want to get. The leaner you do get, I should say. If you're at 40% right now and you want to get to 10%, well, you're not just going to cut out all of that. But if you're at 18% right now and you want to get to 17%, you might not have 20% wiggle room. You might have 5% wiggle room or 2% wiggle room. Like, that's what I mean when I say the cost of getting lean. You're going to have friends around you that can live a healthy, happy life, eating pizza and drinking beer. And you're not going to be able to do that at a certain extent if you want to continue getting leaner and leaner. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think just, if people are debating whether or not they want to get as lean as you're talking about, I will always pose the question, why? Right? And because, like you just said, you can live a healthy, active lifestyle, still enjoying what you want to enjoy. Um, and there are really fantastic purposes to getting as lean as you're talking about when you value certain accomplishments or achievements, or you are able to access maybe, the races that you want to run at the elite level that is important to you, right? So there's a great reason to get as lean as you're talking about. There's a great reason to not do that as well. And I think for people to just know themselves and know what's important, we're not walking away from this podcast with any kind of should thought, other than, should be living maybe a little bit healthier. But what is your overall purpose?
A lot of a lot of the times it's like purely cosmetic too. Like people, it's vain, and people just like, I really want to be lean because I want everybody to be like, wow, look how lean I am. You're probably the only person that cares. like you're gonna go to a pool or a public place and people are gonna be like, wow, that person has a great physique, and that's gonna be their last thought. So make sure there's more to it for you than just that. I promise you that's not worth it, and that's not going to hold you to it. If you want to do it to get to an elite level, that's completely different. If you're competing in something, for instance, like we talk about Spartan races a lot, or something like CrossFit or a competition, there's a huge advantage to not carrying extra body fat.
Mm.
Huge advantage. But if you just like want to be able to do a Spartan with your friends and family, and you don't really care about getting to the elite level, you don't need to be 15% body fat.
Mhm.
So consider these factors. And I'm not telling you not to do it. Like I've been down in that level of leanness before, and a time might come where it's important enough for me to do it again. But you need to be willing to make these massive sacrifices that a lot of people don't understand till they get there, because it's really, really frustrating when you're trying to lose the last 5 pounds and you're like, why is this not working? Why is this taking so long? Why am I stuck at this plateau? It's because the sacrifices now are becoming so great, and the progress has to be so slow that it feels like you're almost crawling.
That's fair. Yeah, and I think too, just from the approach of a mindset coach too, if you are wanting to get that lean with great purpose, that's fantastic. And hopefully that purpose is fulfilling you. I've also come across some people where the fixation is, like you said, it's purely aesthetic, it's purely vain. As someone notes, you have a great physique, they walk away, and that's the last we talk about it or hear about it. And the person who has made these massive sacrifices isn't fulfilled, right? There's a feeling of emptiness, and this leanness becomes obsession, but not fulfillment. And that's where I would just kind of put up that caution sign and say, like, what are we trying to accomplish? How are we feeling fulfilled in our life? Because, like you said, this is very, very doable for someone who is driven and wants to get it done. I don't want people to think they can't do it. It's just, what are we doing it for?
Also, it, if you start to compare your best your best performances, your best physique, your best whatever to where you are now, and it becomes your baseline almost. So
Mhm.
you're like, now anything less than that doesn't feel lean enough. You're like, oh man, I'm so much fatter than I was before, or I'm so much more out of shape than I was before. But you kind of forget the sacrifices you made to get there. It's like the same reason people keep having kids, because you're
Yeah.
like, you forget the sleepless nights and like the beginning, and you're like, you remember. And I say this jokingly, obviously, like I get why people have multiple kids, but you also really do forget the tough times. You just remember all the greatness, and then when you're in the heat of the moment, you're like, holy shit, I forgot about this. I forgot I can't eat pizza. I forgot that I have to work out twice a day. I forgot that I can only eat chicken and broccoli. Like you forget that stuff. All you remember is how lean I was, and you're like, that was awesome. I loved being that lean. It felt so good. I performed so well, right? Um, and that's one of those things that you almost can't explain it well enough until someone's in it.
Yeah, that's great. This is helpful. I think people have a lot to take away, a lot to think about, and a lot of tools that they can implement as well, which is awesome. So whatever degree you want to lose or gain, obviously, um, you've got some implementation that you can do right away.
Yeah, so I think my big like to summarize, my big message here is obviously strive for what your optimal health is, but understand that there's a big range of optimal health. Um, and it doesn't need to be 18 to 28%. Once again, that's a scale. You're gonna have some people on higher than 28% that are very healthy. You're gonna have some people under 18% that are very healthy. That's a range that somebody had to put together. There's always outliers, but find where you feel your best, where you perform your best, where you move the best and live the best, and you're the most comfortable and confident in your body. Um, and then decide if you want to go past that or not. And there's no wrong answer here. Um, but take it a day at a time, take it a step at a time, take it a body fat percentage at a time, rather than saying I need to get back to 15% body fat. Like get from wherever you are now a little bit leaner and reevaluate how you feel and perform and like um this the level of sacrifice you need to maintain that before you just put your blinders on and shoot for that goal that may not be realistic for where you are right now in your life.
I love it. Well done.
um this is one of those things where we could just go further and further down this rabbit hole, but I'm happy to. If anybody wants to have this conversation, or you're trying to decide how much further you want to push your journey, or if you want to push your journey further, like reach out and let's chat about that. I'd be happy to do that with any of you guys. But I think we'll wrap it up at that, because I don't need to throw more confusion or things to think about into this one episode.
I honestly, if there's any other thing that you can mention, it would be accountability. Because if people are going to take this challenge or want this challenge in their life, the cost of where you're headed in terms of that leanness is going to require more and more accountability.
Agreed. And that kind of circles back to the beginning. Like, what does it take to get lean? Well, you could all of you guys listening could write the list. You know what it takes. It takes more protein, more fruits, more vegetables, less junk food, more movement, better sleep, more water, less alcohol. Like, you guys could all write this list. Nothing I've said there, you're like, oh shit, that's right. I didn't think of that. So it's just becomes what percentage of each, right? If you're in the beginning, if you're closer to the 28, then the percentage, you have more wiggle room in each of those categories. As you get closer to the 18, the wiggle room gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. People don't hire coaches because they can't write that list. People hire coaches to hold them to that list. So we're gonna teach you tricks and habits and skills and all those kinds of things if you come to Breaking 90 Fitness and work with us, but we're not going to blow your mind when we tell you to eat more protein, fruits, and vegetables. We're just going to help you do
Oh, that was a great little mic drop situation.
it. Awesome. Awesome. Um, all right. Let's leave it at that. The one thing that I've been telling people lately, like if you are struggling with your protein, find ways just to sneak it in. Like don't overthink it. Don't be like, oh, I have to eat 17 chicken breasts a day to hit my goal. Find a protein powder that you like and that you can mix well with things. Find a Greek yogurt that you like, find a cottage cheese that you like. The type of things that can mix well into foods help you boost those numbers. Like, most people like eggs aren't crazy high in protein, but you can throw a little bit of cottage cheese in your eggs. Most people like a smoothie. Find a protein powder that mixes into your smoothie well. Find a yogurt bowl, dessert bowl that you like. Like, these little additives to your day make it so that you don't need to just sit down and eat a bunch of dry chicken breasts. You are gonna have to eat some of it, but it doesn't need to be all of it.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. All right, guys. Wherever you're listening, do us a huge favor, take a screenshot, share it to Instagram, and tag at Breaking 90 Fitness so that we see you listening. And let us know if you have any questions, comments, or want to dig further into this topic.